The room is silent, save for the rhythmic, unsettling tick of a grandfather clock that seems to measure the depletion of resources rather than the passing of time. In the dim amber light of a desk lamp, a pair of hands' palms calloused by the friction of effort grip a worn leather wallet as if it were the last anchor keeping a ship from drifting into the abyss. There is a specific, visceral coldness that settles into the marrow when one checks a bank balance and finds the number hovering dangerously close to zero. It is not merely a financial state, it is a contraction of the soul. Across the world, millions sit in this exact posture. The hunched shoulders, the shallow, jagged breathing, the eyes darting across a screen, calculating, subtracting, and fearing. We are taught, from the moment we begin to understand the mechanics of survival, that the world is a finite box, a room with limited oxygen. We are told that in times of lean harvest, the only responsible, rational, and virtuous path is to scrimp, to hide, to hoard, and to guard every copper coin as if it were a drop of blood. Yet, consider the paradox that governs this anxiety. The very grip with which one holds on to the remaining ember is the same force that denies it the oxygen needed to burst into flame. The harder the hand clenches, the more the world recoils, perceiving the fist not as a symbol of strength, but as a barrier to the natural flow of life. It is an ancient, heavy trap. Most people believe they are clutching their survival. In truth, they are clutching their own stagnation. The dam is built not of stone or earth, but of the paralyzing fear that if one lets go, the river will cease to flow. To understand why the clenched fist mentality is a fundamental failure of spiritual and psychological physics, one must engage in a process of recursive deconstruction. Why do we hold on? Because we believe that the source of our supply is external, finite, and capricious. We view money as a static object, a possession that, once lost, vanishes into the void. This is the perspective of the materialist, and it is a prison. How does this perspective manifest? Through a feedback loop of scarcity. When the conscious mind identifies with the scarcity, the subconscious, which functions as a literal-minded executor of our internal blueprints, begins to map out a reality consistent with that lack. If the soul declares, "I am empty," the universe, acting as a mirror, reflects that emptiness back with surgical precision. The question must be asked, what is the nature of the supply? If one looks at the structure of a tree, it does not hold its fruit in a desperate, shivering grasp. It produces. It releases. It sheds its leaves to make room for new growth. The tree understands that its substance is not found in the leaves it possesses, but in the unseen, subterranean network of roots connected to the infinite moisture of the earth. Why does the human mind struggle with this? Because the ego thrives on the illusion of control. To hoard is to claim, "I control this." To give is to acknowledge, "I am a participant in a larger system." The ego fears the latter because, in a system of universal flow, the ego is not the commander, it is merely a conduit. Psychologically, the act of hoarding creates a closed system identity. When one lives in a closed system, every transaction is perceived as a loss. The payment of a debt is seen as a theft of one's vitality. This creates a state of chronic, low-grade trauma. The body remains in a sympathetic nervous system state, the fight or flight mode, which physically inhibits the brain's ability to perceive opportunity. When you are in flight mode, you cannot see the open door. You are too busy scanning the perimeter for the wolf of poverty. By deconstructing the myth of the finite box, one realizes that the only thing actually being guarded is the very fear that perpetuates the lack. The supply is not in the account. The supply is in the circulation. Imagine a mountain stream. In its upper reaches, it is wild, crystalline, and brimming with the kinetic energy of the heights. It rushes over granite, swirls in deep eddies, and nourishes the valley below. This is the nature of a life lived, in accordance with the law of circulation. Now imagine that a traveler, terrified of losing this water, decides to scoop a portion into a basin and carry it with him. He seals the basin with a heavy, leaden lid. For a time, the traveler feels secure. He has his supply. He carries it on his back, his muscles aching under the weight of his own safety. He walks for days, the sun beating down upon him, his throat parched, his skin cracked. He reaches the basin, desperate for a drink. He pries open the lid, only to recoil. The water inside has turned to a dark, viscous sludge. It is stagnant. It has lost its clarity, its sweetness, its life. It has become a source of decay rather than nourishment. The traveler had mistaken the vessel for the source. He thought he could own the river. He thought he could freeze the flow. But life, by its very definition, requires motion. Currency shares its root with current, and a current that is dammed is no longer a current. It is a swamp. Contrast this traveler with the wise man who sits by the bank. He does not carry the water in a closed jar. He cups his hands, drinks his fill, and lets the excess wash over him, knowing that the mountain never tires of pouring. He knows that the stream does not belong to him, yet he is never without it. His hands remain open, ready to receive the next surge of the mountain's bounty. The traveler who hoards is dying of thirst beside a pool of his own making, while the man who trusts the flow is invigorated by the very river that sustains all things. Take a moment to reflect. Have you been guarding a stagnant pool, fearing that to release it would be to go thirsty? Consider the areas of your life where you are clutching the lid of the jar, praying for more water while the internal supply has already begun to spoil. To move from the consciousness of the tight fist to the power of the open hand, one must perform a deliberate, tactical shift in behavior. This is not about blind optimism. It is about the cold, hard application of a spiritual law. You are a channel, not a container. A container has a capacity, and once it is filled, it is finished. A channel has no end. It is a bridge between the infinite and the manifest. To begin this integration, you must find a way to break the physical habit of the contraction. Today, observe your reaction to the next bill you handle. Notice the instinctive tighten in your stomach. Stop. Breathe. Do not fight the fear, but consciously override it. As you prepare to pay, visualize not the loss of your money, but the blessing of the service you have received. You are not losing. You are participating in the circulation of life. If this message has begun to untie the knots in your own chest, I invite you to like this narrative, signaling your readiness to participate in the flow. By doing so, you are moving from a passive observer to an active, conscious conduit of this truth. Subscribe to stay anchored in this wisdom, for we are just beginning the work of clearing the channel. The rust in the pipes is beginning to loosen. The stagnation of the stagnant pool is meeting the pressure of the fresh mountain stream. But there is a danger in this transition, a moment when the water first turns brown and turbulent before it runs clear. Some will panic at the sight of this debris and turn off the faucet, convinced that the law has failed them. Do not be that person. You are on the precipice of a radical reorganization of your reality. In the next chapter, we shall descend into the eye of the storm, the moment of the $5 threshold, and witness exactly how a soul at the end of its rope learned to command the tides of fortune. The dam is cracking, and the true current is about to be unleashed. The hour is late, and the room feels smaller than it did at dusk. A woman sits at a scarred wooden table, the kind of surface that has absorbed the history of countless meals and silent anxieties. In the center of the table lies a single, crisp bank note, $5. To the casual observer, it is a trifle, a fragment of paper that might cover the cost of a meager lunch or a bus fare. To the woman, however, it is the absolute horizon of her existence. It is the final barricade between her and the encroaching void of the city streets. Outside, the rain taps against the window pane with a persistent, mocking rhythm mirroring the frantic cadence of her own heart. She breathes shallowly, as if the very act of deep respiration might consume the remaining air of her sanctuary. Her hands, resting on the table, are clenched white at the knuckles. She is not merely holding money, she is holding her identity as a survivor. She is terrified that if she lets go of this final token, she will evaporate, losing her place in the tangible world. This is the threshold of contraction. It is the moment where the mind, the master of logic, and the servant of fear screams that generosity is synonymous with self-annihilation. She is caught in a paradox. She is starving because she cannot afford to feast, and she cannot afford to feast because she is so desperately clutching the crumbs. The scene is heavy with the gravity of a life or death decision, though no weapon is drawn and no voice is raised. It is the silent, psychic war between the ego's desire to hoard and the spirit's need to flow. Why does the human spirit, when faced with its final resources, reflexively recoil? The answer lies in the deeply ingrained, primitive belief that our supply is a finite stock, akin to a grain silo during a famine. We believe that we are the architects of our own survival, and therefore, every unit of currency is a brick in the wall we are building against the storm. But how does this belief distort the fundamental truth of our existence? It obscures the nature of the cause. We treat the money as the cause of our safety, when in reality, the money is merely an effective manifestation of our internal alignment. When the woman holds that $5 bill, with a heart pounding in terror, what is she actually declaring to the architecture of the universe? She is declaring, I am a child without a father. I am a being in a hostile world. I am powerless. Recursive thinking forces us to ask, if the subconscious mind is the engine room of our reality, and it accepts our emotions as its primary input, what is it building from that fear? It builds a framework of lack. It takes that $5 and multiplies the experience of not enough, because the input was, I do not have enough. The logic is circular and self-defeating. How then does one break this loop? One must understand that the universe is not a shopkeeper that demands a payment before it provides a service. It is a mirror. It waits for the individual to initiate the vibration. If you wait for the outer to change, for the bank balance to rise, for the job offer to arrive before you dare to be generous, you are demanding that the effect dictate the cause. You are waiting for the reflection in the mirror to smile before you decide to move your own facial muscles. The psychological shift required here is profound. It is the transition from victim of circumstance to sovereign of the flow. To give when you are afraid is to signal to your subconscious that you are governed by a law higher than the contents of your wallet. It is an act of spiritual defiance. By releasing the $5, you are not losing $5. You are destroying the identity of the person who is limited by $5. You are burning the bridge to your old self so that the new self, unencumbered by the shackles of fear, can inhabit the space you have cleared. Florence Scovel Shinn, the great teacher of the unseen, once sat across from a woman whose life had become a monument to despair. The student was, by every metric of the material world, destitute. Her rent was in arrears, her cupboards were bare, and her soul was tethered to the fragile reality of those last $5. The woman did not come to Florence seeking a miracle. She came seeking permission to continue suffering. She wanted to be told that her fear was justified, that the world was indeed a cruel, unyielding place. Instead, Florence offered her a spiritual law. She looked at the woman and said, "You are a prisoner to those $5. As long as you hold them in terror, they are the bars of your cell. You must give $1 away." The ego, in its predictable agony, screamed. The woman's mind flooded with the reasonableness of poverty. How could this be divine? How could I be expected to give away 20% of my remaining survival? Is this not the height of madness? The logic of the world dictated that she should save the dollar, stretch it, and wait for a change in fortune that had no logical basis for arriving. But the woman chose to trust the law. She took the $1, and with a hand that trembled not from the lack of money, but from the weight of the surrender, she gifted it to a cause that represented spiritual nourishment to her. Crucially, she did not simply let go of the money. She blessed it. She said, "I send this forth, not in fear, but in faith. I know that this is a seed, and I thank the Infinite for the harvest that is already organizing itself." The transformation was not instantaneous in the way a stage magician performs a trick. There was no gold raining from the ceiling, but the atmosphere of her life shifted immediately. The suffocating pressure in her chest began to dissolve. Because she had chosen to act as if she had more than enough, she was no longer looking at the ground, counting pennies. She began to look up, her senses sharpened, her heart receptive. Within days, a series of unlikely, almost improbable coincidences occurred. A dormant connection, a long-forgotten opportunity, and a sudden clarity of purpose converged. She did not find a windfall. She found a path that had been hidden by the fog of her own terror. The $1 was the key that unlocked the door to a room she had been standing in all along. She had not bought the opportunity. She had simply cleared the vision required to see it. The truth is stark. You are currently paying for your anxiety with your future. Every moment spent in the contraction of the last $5 is a moment subtracted from the life of abundance you were designed to lead. To embody this, you must stop waiting for the evidence of supply and begin acting as a person of supply. Today, perform a fearless release. Identify a small, manageable amount. It does not need to be a fortune that feels like a genuine stretch of your faith. Do not give it to settle a debt or to fulfill a chore. Give it as a deliberate, joyful declaration of your sovereignty. As you release it, do not track it. Do not hold your breath, waiting for the return. Release it with the confidence of a king bestowing a gift, knowing that the source of the gift is not your account, but the infinite, circulating life force that feeds the stars and the tide. Before you move further into the depths of this study, consider this moment a pause for your own alignment. If you are ready to stop being a prisoner of your own ledger, click the like button. It is a small act, but it is an act of commitment. Subscribe to this journey, for we are mapping the geography of a new reality. The shift has begun. You have moved from the tight-fisted survivor to the conscious channel. But there is a deeper mystery at play. If giving is a magnet, then what are the hidden laws governing the quality of that magnetism? What happens when the subconscious mind begins to perceive your acts of giving not as a loss, but as a command to fill the void you have created? In the next chapter, we shall explore the anatomy of the channel, the difference between the jar that is filled and the conduit that is always flowing, and discover why the universe is not just waiting for you to receive, but waiting for you to let go. The water is rising. The pipe is opening. Are you ready for the pressure of the infinite? The wind howls across the desolate moor, yet the river deep, steady, and relentless continues its inexorable journey toward the sea. It does not ask the clouds for permission to flow, nor does it inquire of the granite beneath it whether the passage is permitted. It simply is. The river is the supreme master of its own existence because it never pauses to hoard a single drop. It understands, with a wisdom ancient and liquid, that its strength is derived entirely from its movement. Contrast this with the human soul standing upon the bank, clutching a rusted iron bucket. There is a profound, almost tragic irony in the way we approach the wealth of the universe. We stand amidst the torrential downpour of potential, of opportunity, of connection, of substance, and we hold up our little buckets, frantically trying to trap the rain. We measure our worth by the depth of the water in our own stagnant containers. We fear the evaporation of our store. We fear the theft of our surplus. We fear the moment the bucket runs dry. But observe the paradox. The moment the bucket is filled to the brim, it becomes a burden. It limits the bearer. It requires constant defense. If the lid is tightened, the water within begins to turn, losing the sweet oxygen of the stream, becoming heavy and lifeless. We are walking through a garden of infinite harvest, with our hands balled into tight fists, terrified that if we reach out to pluck a fruit, we might somehow lose the grip we have on our own emptiness. The world tells us that security is found in the accumulation of the bucket. The truth tells us that security is only found in the identity of the river. To grasp the spiritual physics of currency, one must first look at the very etymology of the word. Currency and current share the same root, the same lineage of meaning. Both denote a state of flow, of continuous motion, of energy in transit. Why, then, has the modern psyche perverted this meaning, turning currency into a synonym for a stagnant, motionless hoard? We must ask, why does the mind gravitate toward the container model of wealth? It is an ego-driven defense mechanism. The ego seeks to solidify the fluid, to name the nameless, and to fence in the infinite. By conceptualizing wealth as a physical object, a gold coin, a bank balance, a possession, the ego feels it has achieved control. But how does this control actually function? It functions through exclusion. To have a full container, one must exclude the rest of the world. One must nail the lid shut. How, then, does the channel model operate in opposition to this? A channel has no lid. A channel does not seek to capture, it seeks to convey. If a pipe is connected to an infinite reservoir, its capacity is not determined by its width, but by its openness. Whether a gallon or a billion gallons flows through it, the pipe itself remains unchanged, save for the polish of the water rushing through it. The recursive question arises, if I am a channel, what am I conveying? You are conveying divine substance. This substance is the raw material of creation. It is everywhere, like the invisible atmosphere, pressing against every pore of your life. When you hoard, you act as if there is no air, attempting to trap a single breath in your lungs until you suffocate. When you circulate, you realize that you are an open passage for the breath of the universe to move through you. The psychological shift is from how much can I keep to how much can I flow. In the container model, the outgo is a loss. In the channel model, the outgo is the very mechanism of the intake. The universe cannot flow into a blocked channel. By giving, you are not draining the reservoir. You are clearing the pipe of the debris of fear. You are verifying your connection to the source. The intake is the reward for the outgo. You are the architect of your own capacity, and your capacity is defined by your willingness to release. In the high, arid plains of a long-forgotten kingdom, there lived a master gardener named Elian. Elian was famous not for his wealth, but for the lush, emerald-green oasis that surrounded his home, a shocking contrast to the dusty, sun-scorched earth that stretched for leagues in every direction. Other farmers struggled. They carried water from the distant, erratic well in heavy clay pots, sealing them with wax and burying them deep in the earth to prevent evaporation. Their crops withered, and their faces were etched with the deep lines of a perpetual, nagging want. Elian, however, did not own a single pot. He had constructed a simple, elegant system of irrigation, a series of wooden troughs and channels that meandered through his land. He did not guard the water. He spent his days clearing the channels of fallen leaves, pebbles, and the encroaching weeds of apathy. He watched the water rush from the distant spring, move through his soil, and eventually spill out into the wild, uncultivated desert beyond his borders. His neighbors mocked him. "Elian," they would shout, "you are a fool. The water is precious, and you let it flow into the sand. Why do you not store it? Why do you not build a cistern?" Elian would simply smile, his hands covered in the dark, rich silt of his labor. "If I trap the water," he replied, "the soil becomes sour, and the stream dies. It is the movement of the water that makes the garden green. If I stop the flow to save a cup, I kill the life that feeds the mountain. One season, a great drought descended. The wells of the other farmers ran dry, their sealed pots containing only dust and spiders. But Elian's troughs remained damp. He had kept his channels so clean, so perpetually ready, that he had tapped into a deep, hidden vein of the earth that the others had long ago missed. Because he had been a faithful steward of the flow, the water found him. His garden did not merely survive, it thrived, serving as a beacon of life in a dying land. He was not the owner of the water, he was the guardian of the channel, and because he refused to close the end of his pipes, the universe ensured they never ran dry. To embody the truth of the channel, you must consciously shift your daily perspective. You are not a jar to be filled. You are a conduit to be utilized. The next time you find yourself gripped by the urge to hold on, whether it be money, time, or energy, recognize it as the ego's attempt to nail the lid on the jar. Today, perform the act of the open end. When you pay for a meal, a service, or a necessity, do not merely transact, transmit. Send the money forth with the active intention of blessing the recipient. Imagine the currency flowing through you like a current of light, returning to the infinite source to be replenished before returning to you in a new form. Do not look for the return in the same direction it left. The river does not return to the mountain in the same drop of water. It returns as clouds, as rain, as snow. Trust the cycle. If you feel the weight of the container mentality beginning to lift, and you are ready to stand as a clear channel for the abundance of the divine, show your intention by liking this transmission. Your commitment is the first step in clearing your own pipes. Subscribe to this narrative, for we are building a foundation of truth that will withstand any drought. You are learning to stop being the owner and starting to be the participant. But there is a hidden mechanism we have yet to address: the internal dialogue. Your subconscious mind is constantly eavesdropping on your transactions, interpreting your every purchase as a command. It is the ultimate servant, and it is currently obeying your commands of lack with terrifying efficiency. In the next chapter, we shall explore the mirror of the subconscious, the secret language that tells the universe who you are and how you can finally force the reflection to smile. The channel is clearing. The water is beginning to move. Are you prepared for what comes when the flow turns crystal clear? The environment is a quiet, sterile office of the mind, a grand, echoing hall filled with infinite filing cabinets. Here, a silent, tireless clerk sits at a mahogany desk, head bowed, pen poised over an endless ledger. This clerk does not sleep. This clerk does not judge. This clerk does not discriminate between truth and fiction. It simply records, and in recording, it commands the world to conform to the ink. Consider the paradox. We often believe we are masters of our destiny, yet we spend our waking hours whispering orders into the ears of this silent clerk that actively dismantle the very lives we claim to want. You stand before the mirror in the morning and declare, "I am successful," yet the clerk is busy transcribing the tremor in your hands as you calculate the rent. You look at a bill, a simple piece of paper representing the exchange of services, and a pang of resentment, a flash of not enough, ripples through your chest. In that microsecond of feeling, you have given the clerk an instruction. You have provided a blueprint. The clerk does not hear your affirmations. The clerk hears your reactions. It watches how you spend. It notes the contraction in your jaw when the cashier announces the total. It catalogs the bitterness in your thoughts as you swipe your card. You are the architect of a prison, and you are shocked that the walls are rising. The mirror does not lie. It shows you exactly what you have been ordering day by agonizing day. The pattern is not external. It is a broadcast, and the universe is merely the receiver, dutifully playing back the frequency you have chosen to tune into. To understand why the subconscious mind acts as the ultimate architect of our financial and spiritual reality, we must employ the method of recursive deconstruction. Why does the subconscious prioritize our reactions over our intentions? Because the subconscious is, by evolutionary design, a survival engine. It is hardwired to prioritize the immediate feeling of safety over the abstract desire for abundance. How does this work? When you feel a pang of resentment, paying a bill, the subconscious mind interprets that reaction as a survival signal. It concludes, this transaction is a threat to our stability. Therefore, we must avoid this threat in the future. The subconscious does not understand the nuance of social responsibility or the benefit of the service received. It only understands that you felt threatened. Consequently, it begins to arrange your life to minimize such transactions. It closes doors to income because it associates receiving with the pain of spending. How do we break the loop? We must ask, what is the nature of the instructions we are sending? If we are, as the ancient teachings suggest, manifestations of divine substance, then we are not separate from the supply. We are the supply. Yet, the subconscious mind has been programmed with the identity of lack. It believes that the money is out there and that it is being taken away. Why does the ego cling to this identity? Because the ego thrives on the narrative of the victim. If you are a victim of the economy, of your employer, or of the landlord, you are excused from the responsibility of creation. You are a passenger on a ship that is taking on water. To shift this requires a fundamental re-identification. You must stop speaking to the universe as a beggar asking for crumbs and begin speaking as a steward managing a vast estate. Recursive analysis reveals that the subconscious is not your enemy. It is a loyal servant that has been poorly trained. It believes your fear is a command. It is waiting for new instructions. Every time you engage in a transaction with gratitude, you are rewriting the code. You are informing the clerk. This is not a loss. This is an investment of my energy, and I am the source of that energy. When you change the instruction, the subconscious, forced by its own programming to be consistent, must begin to rearrange the outer world to match the new, wealthier identity. In the bustling capital of a great empire, there lived a merchant named Julian. Julian was known for his uncanny ability to attract prosperity, even during the harshest winters. Men whispered that he possessed a magic seal, or that he had made a pact with a celestial power. In truth, Julian's magic was a practice he performed every evening in the solitude of his counting house. Julian kept a ledger, but not for his gold. He kept a ledger of blessing. Each day, as he settled his accounts, he did not dwell on the bills he had paid or the expenses he had incurred. Instead, he took a quill and wrote a single line for every transaction. I have sent this energy forth, and it has returned as warmth, as light, as shelter. I bless the receiver, and I celebrate the flow. 1 year, an apprentice asked to learn his secret. Julian handed the boy a ledger and said, "Record everything you spend, but record it as if it were a seed being planted in the earth." The apprentice, however, was a creature of habit. He continued to groan at the prices of his supplies, to sneer at his debts, and to fear the empty bottom of his purse. He filled his ledger with complaints. Years later, the apprentice, now a man, lived in a shack on the edge of the city, clutching his few remaining coins. Julian, who remained prosperous, visited him. The apprentice cried out, "Why does the universe favor you and crush me? I have worked as hard as you. I have saved as carefully as you." Julian looked at the apprentice's ledgers, the books of complaint, and then at his own, the books of blessing. He said, "You were not keeping accounts, my son. You were writing a petition to the universe, asking for more reasons to suffer. You spent your life cursing the seeds you were planting, and then you wondered why your harvest was nothing but thorns. The universe did not crush you. It simply gave you exactly what you were asking for, with such persistent emotional intensity. The apprentice realized then that his subconscious had not been waiting for his gold to increase. It had been waiting for his testimony to change. He had been the director of his own misfortune, and he had been a master of the craft. The transition from a life of scarcity to a life of sovereignty begins with the recognition of your own power to command the subconscious. You are not a victim of your bank balance. You are the commander of your own vibrational field. Starting today, you are forbidden from complaining about a price, a bill, or an expense. This is not a suggestion. It is a spiritual necessity. When you see the total at the register, or when you hold a bill in your hand, you must perform a pattern interrupt. Replace the familiar feeling of contraction with a conscious, deliberate feeling of gratitude. Say to yourself, I thank the divine for the abundance that allows me to participate in this exchange. I send this money forth to bless all whom it touches, and I know it returns to me multiplied. By doing this, you are telling the silent clerk at the mahogany desk that your reality has shifted. You are no longer the person who loses. You are the person who invests. You are the source. If you are ready to reclaim your role as the architect of your own reality, leave a comment below with this declaration. I am the master of my inner ledger. I bless my outgo, and I welcome my harvest. By speaking this, you anchor your intention. Subscribe to stay in the light of this practice, for you are aligning your mind with the infinite currents of prosperity. The mirror is beginning to clear. The subconscious is starting to pivot, its gaze turning toward the new horizons you are painting. But there is a danger in this transition, a moment of divine patience, when the old seeds of lack are still pushing up through the soil, and the new harvest has yet to appear. It is the moment of the greatest test. In the next chapter, we shall explore the law of divine patience, the secret to staying the course when the sky is still dark and the storm is still raging. The foundation is set, the mirror is turning. Are you ready to face your own abundance? Picture a grand, obsidian-tiled hall, illuminated by the cold, flickering light of a dying hearth. In the center sits a man, hands trembling, staring at a stack of envelopes. Each one bears the seal of an obligation, a landlord, a utility provider, a lender. To the man, these are not services rendered. They are daggers aimed at the heart of his security. With every seal he breaks, he feels a phantom weight press upon his chest, a constriction of the breath that echoes the constriction of his bank account. He is caught in the most common of modern tragedies, the paradox of the victim of provision. He lives under a roof that protects him from the storm. He enjoys the warmth of light that defies the night. He utilizes water that flows with the cleanliness of a mountain spring. Yet, in the moment he must honor these debts, he collapses into a posture of defense. He views the act of payment as a ritual of theft, a slow hemorrhage of his life force. He fails to see the irony. The very things he is paying for are the manifestations of his own comfort and progress. He is essentially cursing the light that allows him to read, and lamenting the roof that keeps him dry. This is the debt of resentment, a vibration that sours the soul and turns the act of participation into an act of self-mutilation. He is not merely paying a bill. He is confirming to the universe that he is a subject of scarcity, a man to whom the world is an enemy that demands tribute. The room grows colder, not because the fire has gone out, but because the man has stopped acknowledging the warmth he has already received. To transmute the act of paying bills into a ritual of spiritual alchemy, one must engage in a rigorous deconstruction of the concept of debt. Why do we feel a primal, visceral ache when we release money to satisfy an obligation? It is because we have been conditioned to view money as a hoard of survival and debt as a threat to that survival. How does this psychological structure function? We operate under the delusion that we are losing something when we pay. We believe that our bank account is a static container, and every debit is a hole poked in the bottom. but the deeper, recursive truth is this: nothing is ever truly lost. In the grand ledger of the divine, energy is merely transformed. Why is the current definition of payer so destructive? Because it carries the weight of a victim, one who is forced to surrender. How do we invert this into the archetype of the patron? A patron is one who supports, one who enables, one who commands resources to flow. A patron does not mourn the gold, they celebrate the service. When you pay an electric bill, you are not a victim of the utility company. You are the sovereign benefactor of a network of brilliance. You are the silent partner in a miracle of infrastructure. How does this shift the internal landscape? By moving from victim to patron, you cease to view the transaction as an extraction. You begin to view it as an exchange of value. You are acknowledging that you have already received the value, the warmth, the light, the shelter. Paying the bill is simply the completion of the cycle. It is the closing of the circle. When you pay with gratitude, you are essentially blessing the money as it leaves your hand. Recursive thought leads us to a profound conclusion. If you fear to see money go, you will always be terrified to see it come. The flow cannot be bifurcated. You cannot demand the inflow while damning the outflow. By blessing your outgo, you are physically training your nervous system to associate the release of money with the receipt of abundance. You are telling your subconscious, I am a person of such vast supply that I can afford to honor my commitments with joy. You are no longer defending your territory, you are expanding your influence. In the ancient trading port of Athelgard, there lived two merchants of equal skill and similar goods. The first, Barnaby, was obsessed with the accumulation of his coin. Every time he paid a tax, a vendor, or a transport fee, his face would darken. He would haggle, complain, and lament the injustice of having to part with his treasure. He viewed his money as a finite collection of loyal soldiers, and he felt like a general sending them to their deaths on the battlefield of commerce. As the years passed, his coins grew in number, but his joy withered. He lived in perpetual fear of a bad harvest or a rising tax, always watching his back, always guarding his gate. He was the wealthiest man in the city, and the most frightened. The second merchant, Silas, operated differently. He too paid his taxes and his vendors, but he did so with a flourish of grace. When he paid for the transport of his silk, he would say to the boatman, "Thank you for the skill of your hands and the strength of your sails. May this payment serve you as well as your work has served me." When he paid his taxes, he would bow to the scribe and say, "May this contribute to the stability of the harbor, so that all ships may find safety." Silas did not hoard, he invested, he circulated. He was constantly turning his capital into new ventures, new relationships, and new joys. He was not merely a merchant. He was a patron of the port. People flocked to Silas, not because he was the cheapest, but because he carried the vibration of prosperity. When Silas was in need, the entire city rallied to assist him. When a storm destroyed Barnaby's warehouse, he had no friends to call upon, for he had treated every interaction as a loss. When a fire threatened the port, the people fought to save Silas's ships, for they had been blessed by the prosperity he had circulated. Silas died with empty pockets and a full soul, having lived a life of constant expansion. He understood the secret. The money was not his to keep, it was his to activate. By blessing the outgo, he had magnetized the income, and the port had become his own personal treasury. To embody the archetype of the patron, you must commit to the 2-1-day ritual of grateful outgo. For the next 3 weeks, you are forbidden from paying a single bill without a vocalized blessing. This is not a passive exercise, it is an active, performative act of creation. When the next statement arrives, do not open it with dread. Open it with anticipation. Recognize that the electricity, the water, the communication services are there because you have already enjoyed them. As you write the check or initiate the digital transfer, pause. Place your hand upon the document or the screen. Say aloud, or with deep intensity in your heart, I thank the divine for the services that make my life vibrant. I bless the labor of those who provided them. I send this money forth as a seed of prosperity, knowing it returns to me multiplied, flowing back into my life as even greater abundance. Feel the tension in your stomach relax. Feel the space that opens in your chest as you realize you are not losing, you are contributing. You are the center of a high-level exchange. You are a sovereign entity, and your resources are simply moving at your command to create more life. If you are ready to stop being a victim of your debts and start acting as a benefactor of your own life, acknowledge this shift by liking this narrative. Your like is your signature on a new contract with the universe. Subscribe to stay in this flow, for we are now moving into the most subtle and dangerous part of the journey. The pipes are clearing, and the water is moving, but there is a test that awaits every soul who begins to open the valves of prosperity, the test of divine patience. You have planted the seeds, you have blessed the outgo, and you have shifted your identity, but the ground remains dark. The world does not change instantly. How do you maintain the vibration of the master when the physical world still reflects the old, stagnant reality? In the next chapter, we shall explore the alchemy of the weight, and why the most powerful thing you can do, while the seed is in the darkness, is to act as if the harvest has already arrived. The foundation is solid. The patron has taken his throne. Are you ready for the final test of your resolve? The gardener kneels in the damp, cool earth, his fingernails rimmed with the black soil of intent. He has just finished planting a row of rare seeds, a labor of hope, sweat, and absolute faith. Yet, as the sun begins to set, casting long, melancholy shadows across the furrows, the man experiences a familiar, gnawing agitation. His hand hovers over the spot where the seed lies buried. A voice in his mind, the voice of the ego, masquerading as prudence whispers, "Dig it up, just to be sure. Check if it has sprouted. If it has not, you have been foolish to believe in such a harvest." This is the central agony of the transformative process, the bridge between the sowing and the reaping. It is the dark night of the seed. Most people treat their spiritual and financial intentions with the manic energy of a child who plants a seed in the morning and claws at the dirt by sunset to see if it has taken root. When they find only darkness and silence, they conclude the seed was dead, or worse, that the soil of the universe is hostile. They fail to realize that the most profound transformation happens in the invisible realm, shielded from the light. The paradox is this: the very act of checking to see if you have succeeded is the surest way to guarantee your failure. To look is to doubt. To doubt is to arrest the growth. The man kneeling in the dirt is not a master of the garden. He is a prisoner of his own anxiety, standing watch over a grave he has dug for his own dreams. The soil demands silence, darkness, and time. To deny it these is to deny the harvest itself. Why is the human nervous system so allergic to the gap between action and result? We must deconstruct this through the lens of evolutionary biology and spiritual misalignment. The ego is a creature of the now. It views the future not as an unfolding reality, but as a territory to be conquered or feared. When we perform an act of circulation, a gift, a blessing, a shift in identity, we expect a transaction. We want to see the tally updated on our screen. But the law of circulation does not operate on the speed of digital commerce. It operates on the speed of organic growth. How does this recursive impatience create a feedback loop of failure? When we check for results, we radiate a frequency of lack. The universe, ever literal, detects our vibration. If I am checking to see if I have, I am signaling that I do not yet have. The subconscious mind receives this signal and, in its desire to serve, reinforces the state of not yet having. It manifests more waiting, more doubt, and more testing, because the vibration you have anchored is one of perpetual anticipation rather than possession. Why do we find it so difficult to trust the process? Because we have been conditioned to believe that waiting is a passive state. We have been taught that if we are not doing worrying, calculating, hustling, we are not succeeding. In truth, the wait is the most active, intense phase of the spiritual harvest. It is the period where the unseen forces are rearranging the atoms of your reality. How, then, do we master this? We must redefine divine patience. It is not merely the ability to endure. It is the power to persist in an identity despite the lack of physical evidence. It is the psychological state of already having. When you plant a tree, you do not expect it to be an oak by evening. You celebrate the fact that the oak is already written into the genetic code of the seed. Divine patience is the courage to live in the reality of the harvest before the soil has even been broken. It is the refusal to let the I, the outer world, dictate the truth to the I, the inner authority. Florence Scovel Shinn, in her wisdom, once spoke of a man who was destitute and desperate for a shift in his fortunes. He was a man of great faith, but he was drowning in the ocean of his own circumstances. He was told by the law, act as if. He did not have the means to buy a new wardrobe, nor the connections to secure a new position. He did not have a bag of gold to show for his efforts. However, he decided to perform a symbolic act of already having. He went to a haberdashery and, with his final few coins, purchased a pair of fine, elegant gloves. These were not the gloves of a beggar. They were the gloves of a man of status, a man of business, a man of success. He did not buy a whole suit, for that would have been a lie to his own pocketbook. But he bought the gloves a token, a physical anchoring of his new identity. He began to wear these gloves daily. He walked the streets of the city, not with the hunched shoulders of a man waiting for a miracle, but with the posture of a man who was already living the life he had prayed for. He wore the gloves with the consciousness of a prosperous man. He felt the leather against his skin, and every time he adjusted them, he reminded himself, "The drought is over. I am already that which I seek." His friends mocked him. They asked why a man in his position would waste money on such vanity, but the man did not argue. He remained in the vibration of his gloves. He understood that the gloves were not just clothing. They were a signal to his subconscious that the new man had arrived. Within a short time, the man was approached by an associate he had not seen in years, who offered him a position that perfectly matched the elegance of the gloves he wore. The opportunity did not come because he was wearing leather. It came because the leather had signaled to his soul that he was ready, and the soul had aligned his reality to match the signal. He had mastered the weight by wearing the harvest. To embody the law of divine patience, you must identify your own gloves. What is the small, symbolic action you can take today that signals to your subconscious mind that the season of lack has ended? It does not need to be expensive. It does not need to be grand. It simply needs to be a physical token of your new identity. Perhaps it is buying a pen that feels like the pen of a successful writer, even if you have yet to publish a page. Perhaps it is organizing your desk as if a grand contract were waiting to be signed. Perhaps it is simply standing straighter, speaking with more conviction, or treating your current surroundings with the reverence of a king who is just waiting for his palace to be finished. As you perform this action, commit to the practice of the silent harvest. For the next week, resolve to be silent about your intentions. Do not dig up the soil. Do not check your bank balance with the eyes of a beggar. Do not recount your struggles to others, seeking pity to soothe your anxiety. Instead, walk through your day as a person who has already received the answer to their prayer. When the old panic rises, touch your gloves and remember, it is already done. If you are ready to stop digging up your seeds and start trusting the harvest, acknowledge this commitment by liking this transmission. Your like is your vow to remain steady in the darkness of the soil. Subscribe to our journey, for we are moving into the final, critical transformation. The dissolution of the wanting consciousness. You are learning to hold the vibration of the master, but there is a subtle, almost invisible trap that still catches many who are on the precipice of success. The trap of wanting. As long as you are wanting, you are, by definition, stating that you have not. In the next chapter, we shall explore how to move from the consciousness of the beggar, who is always reaching, to the consciousness of the benefactor, who is always radiating. The harvest is growing. The ground is silent. Are you prepared to walk with the quiet confidence of the finished work? The scene is a cathedral of commerce, a bustling, rain-slicked city square at twilight. Neon lights fracture across puddles like fallen constellations, while the tide of humanity flows in a relentless, gray-toned rhythm. Near the heavy, arched doorway of a prestigious bank, two individuals stand in stark, paradoxical contrast. The first is a man draped in the finest wool, his pockets lined with thick wallets, his face etched with the sharp, hollow lines of chronic apprehension. He pauses to examine a small, copper coin dropped by a passerby, his gaze filled with a cold, analytical disdain. To him, this dime is a nuisance, a reminder of the petty costs of life that he must guard against, lest they erode his mountain of gold. He calculates, he measures, and he clutches. 10 paces away stands a woman, her coat thin against the biting wind, her world seemingly reduced to the meager contents of a worn purse. She observes a beggar huddling near the cathedral steps. With a motion of grace that seems entirely incongruous with her station, she reaches into her purse and produces her last coin, a single, silver-tinted piece, and places it into the beggar's weathered hand. She does not look away, nor does she look at the ground. She smiles, a brief, luminous expression of recognition, and walks onward into the rain. The observer is struck by the dissonance. The wealthy man, despite his treasure, stands in the shadow of lack, governed by the fear of losing the one. The woman, despite her poverty, stands in the light of sovereignty, governed by the power of the all. The paradox is absolute. The man who holds everything is possessed by it, while the woman who releases her all becomes its master. The sovereign's dime is not measured by its weight in metal, but by the intention of the soul that releases it. To grasp the spiritual physics of the sovereign's dime, we must deconstruct the fallacious equation, value equals amount. Why does the ego prioritize quantity over quality? Because the ego operates in the world of material measurement, where bigger is always better and more is always safer. The ego believes that spiritual weight is a product of financial volume. If you give 1,000, you are powerful. If you give a penny, you are insignificant. But how does this logic fail the test of the infinite? We must ask, what is the currency of the soul? It is conviction. When the wealthy miser holds his gold, his conviction is anchored in the fear of loss. When the woman releases her last dime, her conviction is anchored in the certainty of supply. Recursive thinking reveals that the universe does not count your dollars. It measures the intensity of your alignment. How does this work? The subconscious mind, which regulates the flow of your external reality, does not see a transaction as a numeric figure. It sees an emotional imprint. When you give a large sum with the heart of a miser, with fear, calculation, and a desire to get something in return, you are imprinting lack onto the blueprint of your future. You are telling the universe, I am terrified of being empty. Conversely, when you give a pittance with the heart of a sovereign with joy, gratitude, and a reckless, triumphant faith, you are imprinting abundance onto the blueprint. You are telling the universe, I am the source. I am the overflow. The sovereign's dime is a seed of infinite proportion because it is planted in the soil of total surrender. Why is the sovereign's dime more potent than the miser's fortune? Because the dime given in sovereignty represents a complete break from the past. It is an act of total liberation. When you give from your abundance, you are merely moving surplus. When you give from your limit, you are moving the very needle of your destiny. You are proving that your supply is not tied to the account balance, but to the reality of the divine. The universe must rearrange itself to validate your declaration. It has no choice. It must reflect the sovereign. In the legendary city of Ara, the temple held a great offering each year to bless the harvest. The wealthiest man in the city, Lord Vane, arrived in a carriage of gold, his servants carrying chests of coins that clattered like thunder. He poured them onto the altar, his eyes darting to ensure the priests counted every single piece. His face was a mask of calculation. He was paying for influence, buying his safety from the heavens with the cold steel of his excess. A few moments later, a humble weaver, Miri, approached the altar. She had spent the entire year weaving a single, exquisite tapestry, which she had sold that morning for a tiny sum. She held a single, copper coin, her earnings for the day. She looked at the altar, then at the statue of the infinite, and felt a swell of gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She felt the coin not as metal, but as a seed of love. She placed it upon the altar with a silent prayer. I offer this as a thank you for the life that flows through me. I do not ask for a return, for I am already filled. The high priest, a man who could see the threads of the invisible, looked at the altar. Lord Vane's mountain of gold sat silent, a pile of lifeless metal reflecting the greed of its giver. But Miri's single copper coin was burning with a soft, iridescent light. It shimmered with the energy of 1,000 suns, radiating a warmth that filled the entire temple. When the harvest came, the lands of Lord Vane suffered a strange, inexplicable blight, for his gold had purchased no favor. It had only anchored his fear. But the lands of the weaver, Miri, flourished in abundance. Her single coin had acted as a magnet, drawing to her opportunities, connections, and circumstances that transformed her from a weaver into a pillar of the community. She had given from the heart of a sovereign, and the universe had returned the harvest of a queen. The coin was never the point, the sovereignty was the magnet. To embody the sovereign's dime, you must move beyond the habit of calculating the value of your gifts. Today, you are called to identify your own seed amount. This is not a tax on your income, it is a declaration of your power. It should be an amount that, in the past, would have caused you to pause, to calculate, or to worry. That moment of pause is exactly where the power resides. It is the moment where you choose to override the ego's instinct to hoard. Find a place, a person, or a cause that nourishes your spirit. Do not look for a place to get a benefit. Look for a place that represents the divine current in action. Take your seed amount, hold it in your hand. Feel the weight of the metal or the texture of the paper. Recognize that you are holding the power to define your future. Release it with the command, I am the source. This is a seed, and the harvest is already mine. Do not look back. Do not measure the return. Simply walk forward with the poise of a sovereign. If you are ready to stop measuring your worth by the amount in your bank and start measuring it by the power of your spirit, affirm this transition by liking this narrative. Your like is your seal upon the coin. Subscribe to this channel, for we are nearing the most dangerous, and yet the most exhilarating, part of the process. The mirror is turning, the pipes are open, and the sovereign has taken the throne. But the world you inhabit, the world of wanting, is a persistent illusion. It is a siren song that will try to pull you back into the sea of need. You are currently in the transition zone, the space between the old reality and the new. In the next chapter, we shall dismantle the loop of wanting, the psychological trap that keeps you reaching for a future that is already standing right behind you. The coin is spent. The harvest is rising. Are you prepared to stop wanting and start having? The horizon of the mind is a vast, shimmering desert, and upon its dunes walks the traveler of perpetual desire. He carries a canteen that is perpetually empty, not because he is in a land without water, but because he has convinced himself that the water he carries is never the right water. He treks from oasis to oasis, his eyes permanently fixed upon the shimmering mirage ahead, never looking down to see the cool, life-giving spring bubbling beneath his very sandals. There is a profound, aching paradox in the human condition. We spend our lives in the posture of the reaching hand. We walk with our fingers curled toward the sky, eyes darting in search of the next satisfaction, the next acquisition, the next validation. We believe that by wanting, we are setting the engines of our progress in motion. We tell ourselves that desire is the fire of ambition. But observe the traveler's gait. It is heavy, halting, and weary. In the stillness of the desert night, the traveler whispers his litany. I need more. I will be complete when I have that. I am not enough until I acquire this. Each word acts as a sonic hammer, forging the shackles of his own limitation. He does not see that his very state of needing is a broadcast tower, transmitting a signal to the universe. I am deficient. And the universe, being a faithful servant of the law, responds with the only thing it can provide, more opportunities to remain in the state of needing. He is caught in a temporal feedback loop, a circular path where the future he seeks is always pushed exactly one step further away by the very act of desiring it. The mirage is not the destination. The mirage is the state of wanting itself. To dismantle the loop of wanting, one must confront the fundamental architecture of the egoic identity. Why does the mind insist on living in the future? Because the ego cannot exist in the eternal now. The now is a state of completion, and the ego dies in completion. To survive, the ego requires a gap, a distance between where you are and where you want to be. This gap is the playground of the ego, and wanting is the tether that keeps you trapped within it. How does this recursive thinking process reveal the trap? Ask yourself, why do you want? You want because you have accepted a premise of lack. How does that premise dictate your reality? By convincing the subconscious mind that having is an eventuality that resides in the future. Consequently, the subconscious, which is the great arbiter of the manifest world, orders the universe to keep the desired object in the future. The more intensely you want, the more intensely you are declaring your lack of the object, and the more firmly the subconscious places it in the inaccessible tomorrow. Why do we cling to this? Because we fear that to stop wanting is to stop striving. We confuse desire with alignment. Desire is a grasping, frantic, an exhausting pursuit of an external object. Alignment is the quiet, internal realization that you are already the source of all things. When you shift from I want to I am, you are not becoming passive. You are becoming magnetic. How does the transformation occur? It occurs when you stop asking the mirror of the universe to provide and start acting as the reality that already possesses. This is the law of possession. If you truly possessed the wealth, the success, or the love you seek, would you be standing in the street, frantically reaching for it? No. You would be inhabiting it. You would be walking with the calm certainty of ownership. The subconscious does not respond to your desperate pleas. It responds to your state of being. When you stop wanting, you silence the signal of lack. In that silence, the universe finally has the space to manifest the reality you have been holding at bay with your frantic reach. Wanting is the wall, having is the threshold. You must dismantle the wall to cross the threshold. In the ancient kingdom of Xylos, there lived a nobleman named Kale, who was consumed by a singular hunger. He desired to possess the cup of infinite fulfillment, an artifact said to be hidden in the deepest, most treacherous reaches of the Great Basin. Kale spent decades traveling, fighting, and sacrificing. He grew old and frail, his hands shaking, his mind clouded by the obsession. He spent every waking hour imagining the moment he would touch the cup, his wanting becoming a living, breathing shadow that trailed him across the sand. He arrived at the center of the basin, where the legend claimed the cup was hidden. He climbed the highest dune, his heart hammering against his ribs, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He reached the summit and saw, sitting upon a pedestal of white stone, the cup. It shimmered with an ethereal light. Kale lunged for it. He reached out with trembling fingers, screaming his desire, his need, his hunger. But as his hand closed around the golden surface, the cup dissolved into mist. It was a mirage, a projection of his own intense, vibrating desire. Collapsing into the sand, Kale wept. A hermit, who had been watching from the shadows, approached him. "Why do you weep, hunter?" "I have spent my life hunting the cup," Kale sobbed, "and when I finally reached it, it vanished. The universe is cruel." The hermit pointed to the sand, where the cup had stood. "The universe is not cruel, it is literal. You hunted the cup as an object that existed apart from you. You built your life on the premise that you were empty and the cup was full, but the cup you chased was only a mirror of your own projected lack." The hermit then touched Kale's own chest. "The cup was never meant to be reached for. It was meant to be inhabited. You looked for it in the distance because you did not believe it lived within you. You were so busy wanting that you made it impossible to be." Kale realized then that his obsession had been the very thing that kept the cup a mirage. He had been so focused on the future that he had forfeited the reality of the present. He stood, took a deep breath, and surrendered the hunt. In that moment of surrender, he felt a sudden, profound fullness, a peace that surpassed the hunger he had known for a lifetime. He did not need to hunt anymore. He was the cup. To break the loop of wanting, you must perform the surrender of the reaching hand. Today, observe your desires. Notice the need that drives your actions. Whenever you feel the pang of "I want," stop, breathe. Interrupt the pattern. Replace the reach with the recognition. Say to yourself, "I do not need to hunt for that which is already a part of my essence. I release the need, and I occupy the reality." This is not a denial of your desires. It is a change in the nature of your desires. You are moving from a state of hunger to a state of radiance. When you stop wanting, you stop the contraction. You open the channel. You become a steady, calm presence in which things can manifest without the need for struggle. Walk through your day as someone who has already received. Carry yourself with the quiet, satisfied posture of one who holds the keys to their own kingdom. If you are ready to stop chasing shadows and start inhabiting your own abundance, signal your intent to the universe by liking this narrative. Your like is a declaration that the hunt is over. Subscribe to our collective path, for we are arriving at the final, crucial frontier of this journey. The loop is breaking. The mirage is fading. You are beginning to see that the life you reached for was always the life you were meant to lead from within. But there is one final, master-level instruction, the protocol of the channel. You have learned to release, to bless, and to occupy. Now, you must learn to live as a permanent vessel for the divine flow, moving from a life of periodic shifts to a state of constant, effortless grace. The horizon is clear. The traveler has arrived at his own front door. Are you ready to step inside and claim your home? The world is a tapestry woven from threads of golden opportunity and shadows of mundane neglect. At the center of this tapestry stands the individual, a singular point of consciousness tasked with the stewardship of his own reality. Yet, observe the irony. Most pass through their days like ghosts in their own homes, unaware that they possess the keys to a vast, invisible reservoir. They see the day as a series of obligations, a chore list to be endured until sleep grants a brief respite from the pressure of becoming. Imagine a quiet, sun-drenched study where a master craftsman sits at his loom. Beside him lies a spool of pure, iridescent thread, the stuff of divine substance, which he is meant to weave into the fabric of his life. But instead of weaving, he spends his hours polishing the empty loom, complaining that the patterns he desires are not appearing on the cloth. He is so focused on the lack of the finished design that he neglects the very thread in his hand. He is the architect of his own frustration. waiting for the universe to knit his life while he remains paralyzed by the inertia of his own routine. The atmosphere is thick with the dust of should be and not yet. There is a heaviness to the air, a spiritual stagnation born from the belief that life is something that happens to us, rather than something we create through the rhythm of our daily attention. The paradox is biting. We have the power to spin straw into gold, yet we live as if we are beggars in a palace, perpetually searching for a doorway that has been open since the moment of our birth. We are not lacking resources. We are lacking the practice of the presence. To master the life of the channel, one must move beyond the intermittent spark of occasional prayer and into the steady, unwavering flame of a daily protocol. Why is the human mind so prone to falling back into the ruts of lack once the initial excitement of a new teaching fades? It is because the subconscious mind is governed by the law of habit. It does not respond to your sporadic intentions. It responds to the consistent frequency of your baseline existence. How do we break the cycle of backsliding? We must engage in the recursive discipline of the three-step protocol. Release, bless, and inquire. Why release? Because release is the act of physical and spiritual detachment. It forces the ego to surrender its grip on the material. How does this function? It acts as a reset for the nervous system. By releasing a small amount of money, a kindness, or a word of support, you are demonstrating to your subconscious that you are no longer in a state of hoarding. You are demonstrating that you are in a state of flow. Why? Bless. Because blessing is the act of high-frequency observation. When you bless your outgo, you are actively transmuting the energy of the transaction. How does this work? It elevates the vibration of the mundane. When you pay a bill and bless it, you are not merely settling a debt. You are charging the money with the frequency of gratitude, which, by the laws of resonance, will attract more of that same frequency back to you. Why inquire? Because inquire is the act of constant availability. Where can I be a channel today? Is the most potent question in the spiritual lexicon. It transitions the self from a goal-oriented hunter to a purpose-driven receiver. How does this transform the day? It turns your entire life into a field of play. You stop looking for ways to gain and start looking for ways to give. And in that pivot, the universe, which is fundamentally a system of service, immediately sees you as a primary agent of its own expansion. It begins to pour through you because you have proven to be a reliable, open passage. The recursive truth is this. The practice is not to get something. The practice is to become the conduit through which all things arrive. You are not practicing to be wealthy. You are practicing to be the source in expression. In the Guild of the High Scribes, there was a man named Ilara, who was renowned not for his speed, but for the life-changing impact of every scroll he touched. His clients were often distressed, seeking his counsel to resolve deep-seated troubles of the soul. Ilara's method was simple. He carried a silvered pen, and every morning he would perform a threefold ritual. First, he would set aside a small portion of his morning earnings, giving it anonymously to the community fund. This was his release. Second, he would bless every tool in his study, his ink, his parchment, his lamps, acknowledging their role in his service. This was his blessing. Third, he would sit in the silence and ask, "Who today is the one that needs the light I carry?" This was his inquiry. One day, a wealthy nobleman came to him in a state of utter collapse. "I have everything." The nobleman wept. "And yet I feel as though I am dying. I cannot find the joy in any of it." How do you, a scribe of humble means, live with such radiance? Ilara picked up his silvered pen and smiled. "You live in a state of constant capture, my lord. You keep everything you touch. You have become a locked room, and the air in a locked room eventually turns to poison. I do not keep. I do not own. I am merely the pen. If I were to stop the ink from flowing, the pen would become useless, and the ink would dry into a crust. I practice the flow. I release, I bless, and I ask where the ink is needed. Because I am always moving, I am always being refilled. The nobleman stayed, and for 40 days he watched the scribe's protocol. He saw how Ilara never complained about the price of ink, how he gave to the beggar with the same reverence he showed the prince, and how he lived every moment in a state of expectancy. By the end of the 40 days, the nobleman's own spirit had begun to uncurl. He had learned that the secret to the master's life was not in the quality of his tools, but in the consistency of his daily movement. He had stopped being a master of possessions and started being a master of the flow. To integrate this, you must transform your daily life into a series of sacred rituals. For the next 21 days, commit to the protocol of the channel. 1. The small, fearless release. Before noon, engage in one act of giving. It need not be monetary. It can be a referral, a sincere compliment, or the gift of your time. Ensure that the act requires a stretch of your comfort zone. 2. The blessing of the outgo. Whenever you spend, pause and bless. Turn the mundane into the sacred by naming the blessing you are receiving: light, heat, communication, or nourishment. 3. The intuitive seed. At the end of the day, review your actions. Ask yourself, where did I show up as a channel today? These simple, daily anchors will rebuild the neural architecture of your subconscious. You are training the silent clerk at the mahogany desk to record your life as one of infinite surplus. If you are ready to move from a life of sporadic intention to a life of disciplined radiance, signal your commitment by liking this transmission. Your like is the first mark in your new ledger. Subscribe to this community, for we are arriving at the threshold of the final transformation. The pipes are not only clear, they are beginning to hum with the pressure of the infinite. The life you once hunted is now beginning to manifest all around you, appearing in the periphery of your vision like the first light of dawn. But there is one final sovereign step to take. You have learned to release, to bless, and to occupy. Now, you must learn to live as the river itself, dissolving the boundaries between the giver and the gift. In the final chapter, we shall witness the return, the moment when the individual soul realizes it was never separate from the ocean it served. The practice is set, the channel is open. Are you ready to see the end of the river and the beginning of the sea? The journey arrives at the estuary, the place where the river, having traversed the mountain, the valley, and the plains, finally meets the vast, shimmering expanse of the infinite ocean. The water here is no longer a confined current, it is a union. It is the end of the long, arduous trek of the individual drop and the beginning of the eternal state of the sea. Yet, a peculiar paradox lingers at this final threshold. The river does not vanish. It does not cease to be water. It simply ceases to be separate. Imagine standing on the shoreline, the salt spray cooling the skin, the roar of the tide, a rhythmic heartbeat that matches one's own. For so long, the traveler has been concerned with the how of the flow, the clearing of channels, the blessing of outgo, the patience of the seed. But here, at the edge of the world, all that labor falls away. The horizon is not a wall. It is an invitation. There is a sublime, almost terrifying beauty in this moment. The individual who has spent his life building a dam, then tearing it down, then learning to be a channel, now realizes that the ocean was the source of the river all along. He was never carrying the water. He was always carried by it. The horizon is not something he must reach. It is something he must simply enter. The struggle of the eye dissolves into the majesty of the all. The air is charged with the ozone of transformation. The traveler looks back at the winding path he carved through the mountains, then turns to face the blue, boundless deep, and understands that he is not walking into the unknown. He is returning to the only home he has ever truly known. To realize the truth of the return, one must undertake the ultimate deconstruction, the dissolution of the separate self. Why do we believe that we are individuals standing outside of the divine flow? We are conditioned by the material world to believe that our skin is a border, a partition that separates the me from the universe. This is the primordial deception. How does this recursive illusion maintain its grip? By convincing us that we are the ones who must make things happen. We think we are the pilots of the ship, when in reality, we are the ship itself, drifting upon a sea of divine substance. We ask, how do I manifest wealth? And the ego answers with a list of techniques, strategies, and efforts. But the deeper, truer answer is, you do not manifest, you recognize. Why is this recognition so difficult? Because it requires the death of the ego's need to be a doer. The ego finds comfort in the struggle because the struggle proves its existence. To surrender to the ocean is to relinquish the illusion of control. But how does one live in the world while surrendering to the infinite? One lives as a transparent vessel. The recursive truth is that sovereign wealth is not something you acquire. It is a frequency you inhabit. When you realize that the river and the ocean are made of the same substance, you no longer feel the need to save your drops. You become reckless with your generosity. Not because you are foolish, but because you know that you cannot be emptied. You are the sea. How does this shift the psychology of abundance? It moves you from getting to being. In the state of being, the distinction between giver and receiver disappears. You realize that when you give, you are giving to yourself. When you receive, you are receiving from yourself. The law of circulation is not a business transaction, it is a heartbeat. It is the rhythmic expansion and contraction of the divine. By living in this state, you are no longer a person who has money. You are a presence through which abundance flows. You are the horizon itself, inviting the world to meet you. In the twilight of the ancient world, there was a king named Eris who ruled over a kingdom of glass. His kingdom was perfect, ordered, and wealthy, but he lived in a state of perpetual anxiety. He feared the tides. He spent his days on the balcony of his palace, watching the sea, obsessively charting the high and low marks, afraid that one day the water would not return. He had built massive walls of stone to keep the ocean at bay, believing that if he could contain the sea, he could control his fortune. One evening, a simple fisherman, an old man with skin like sun-bleached leather, walked up to the palace gates. He asked to see the king. When admitted, the fisherman did not bow. He asked the king, "Why do you build walls against your own life?" Eris, confused, pointed to the horizon. "The tide is fickle. It retreats. It leaves me with the mud. I must contain the water so that I am never left wanting." The fisherman laughed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the glass palace. He led the king down to the water's edge. "Look," the fisherman said, "the tide does not retreat because it has lost its strength. It retreats so that it can return with the force of the entire world. It must let go of the shore so that it can embrace the deep. You fear the low tide because you believe it is lack. But the low tide is the preparation for the homecoming. You are the only thing that stands between yourself and the ocean, because you are trying to be the shore, while your soul is the tide." The king looked out at the vast, dark water, and for the first time, he saw not a resource to be guarded, but a presence to be joined. He walked forward, stepping into the surf, letting the cold water wash over his feet. He felt the pull of the currents not as something to be fought, but as something to be trusted. In that moment, he felt the walls of his kingdom, and the walls of his own heart, dissolve. He was not a king guarding his gold. He was the tide, rising and falling with the breath of the universe. From that day forward, the kingdom of glass became a kingdom of grace, and the king was known as the one who walked with the horizon, never fearing the retreat, for he knew that the return was guaranteed by the very nature of the sea. To embody the truth of the return, you must release the final vestige of the doer. Today, perform the surrender of the shore. Find a moment of stillness at the edge of a body of water, in a quiet park, or even in the silence of your own room. Close your eyes and visualize the path you have traveled. See the struggles, the fears, the moments of clutching, and the breakthroughs of flow. Now, see them as they truly are, ripples in the water. You are not the ripples. You are the water itself. Say to yourself, I am not a prisoner of the shore. I am the tide. I am the movement. I am the return. This is your new identity. You are no longer someone who needs to be fixed, healed, or filled. You are the infinite in expression. Carry this lightness with you. When you encounter difficulty, do not fight it as a problem. Recognize it as a movement of the tide. Trust that the ebb is simply the preparation for a greater flood. If you have walked this path from the dam to the river, and finally to the sea, solidify your transformation by liking this narrative. Let your engagement be the final act of your old identity. Subscribe and stay connected to this current. For while this journey of the manuscript is complete, your life as the ocean has only just begun. You have arrived at the horizon. The dam is gone, the pipes are clear, the mirror is turned, and the tide is full. You are the master of the flow, the steward of the substance, and the architect of your own eternity. The story of your wanting has ended, and the story of your being begins now. Walk forward, not with the trepidation of the traveler, but with the quiet, undeniable gravity of the sea. You are the flow. You are the source. You are the return. And so it is.